Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. This is being recorded on Sunday, March 7th, 2021. And we are in Acts chapter 22, and we're going to start at verse 22. We're going to start with verse 21, pick it back up, and double do that verse because it ties where we left off with where we're going. Then the Lord said to me, "Go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles." Paul is talking immediately after his arrest in Jerusalem, and he was arrested in the temple. There was a riot, or right outside the temple. There was a riot going on. People were trying to take him outside the temple to beat him up. The basic idea, they meant to kill him. Mob violence. And the Roman garrison looking over the temple saw a riot starting, and they went out and arrested the person that seemed to be the center of the attention, which is Paul. And when they found out he was not a terrorist, an insurrectionist, or anything, and he was in fact a very educated man, they let him address the crowd after they got him in a safe place. They had to do some violence to get him there, bodily carry him. That was not something Romans did routinely. They know they're in an unusual situation, though, and they're there to keep the peace, and they're going to do what it takes to keep the peace. And he's been giving this defense. He's told his history. And when he gets then to verse 21 and says this, then the last statement that he gets to make is, "The Lord said to me, 'Go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles.'" So that's where we left it. He's been... The crowd's been listening to him up to this point. And at this point, things change. Verse 22. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, "Rid the earth of him. He is not fit to live." As they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust in the air, the commander ordered Paul to be taken into the barracks. He directed that he be flogged and questioned in order to find out why the people were shouting at him like this. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't been found guilty?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "This man is a Roman citizen." The commander went to Paul and asked, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" "Yes, I am," he answered. Then the commander said, "I had to pay a big price for my citizenship." "But I was born a citizen," Paul replied. Those who were about to question him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. Now, the commander should have known that because Paul just told him a few verses before that he was born in Tarsus of Sicily. And, of course, the commander may not have known all of the geography of the Roman Empire and may not have known that Tarsus in Sicily was a Roman colony, and so anybody born there was automatically a Roman citizen. I'll give the commander a pass for that, or let's face it, he was in the middle of a mob situation when he got told that, and so, I'll give him a pass. And he's doing what he's supposed to do, find out the information, and standard Roman interrogation technique for a non-citizen was take him in and flog him and ask him questions, get the answers we want out of him. They're at least listening to Paul. Some of the other places Paul's been, they didn't pay attention to the fact he's a Roman citizen. He speaks up. The centurion knows he doesn't have authority to flog a Roman citizen, and goes get the commander because commander's the one that gave it, and Commander's got to be the one that changes the command. Um, Centurion's not fixing to get in trouble. He's going to make the commander do it, basically. Well, the commander finds out, Paul's a Roman citizen. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting in trouble with the Roman government. Um, the commander at this point is a Roman citizen, but he had to, by Roman law, I think, being a soldier for 20 years, have served in a foreign war, and then pay basically 5 years' wages for a common soldier uh, to get citizenship. Very often, even then, you had to be of certain ranks. You had to bribe some official to get them to consider your application, et cetera, et cetera. So he paid a very dear price. He spent most of his life as a non citizen Roman soldier to get a chance at being a citizen. And he paid a lot of money. He had to save money. And he probably had to be at least a centurion or higher. Now, after retirement, it's a little easier for a retired Roman soldier to get citizenship. Um, if you managed to survive until you retired, just being a retired soldier and the normal price, you also had to have a good recommendation from some local official, which generally meant you wanted to move back to where either somebody knew you or where they appreciated you, and finding some official that would recommend you is decently easy. It's kind of like getting a congressman to recommend you for some uh, non-military school. They'll go, yeah, okay, he's a citizen. He wants us to recommend him. Sure, let's recommend him. Somebody will like you enough to recommend you. But this is an active commander, which means he was still active duty. He had to pay through the nose at his wages, and it's something to brag about. But citizens who in the Roman Empire who became citizens as adults were viewed as, socially, as second class citizens. If you were born a Roman citizen, it said something about you. Your parents were Roman citizens. Whether they bought into Roman citizenship or whether they, were born Roman citizens, didn't matter. Being born a Roman citizen was different. Here in America, we're a land of immigrants, and an immigrant that becomes a citizen, we honor that. We don't honor it greater than somebody who was born a citizen, but we honor it because it does take some work, it does take some knowledge, it takes some skill, and we recognize that, and we recognize somebody who wanted to do that much work to become a American citizen is worthy of some sort of respect, and so we give it honor. The Romans, they'd gotten by this point in time to not accepting that as much. They were beginning to feel there was too many non-Roman Romans. It wasn't xenophobia. It wasn't what we call nationalism exactly. It was more like, if it was an Italian that became a Roman citizen, people were like, okay, that they're at least, like, excuse me, I forgot to turn my phone off, and they're at least looking like they should in the right ethnic group, and the Romans accepted that. But by this point in time in the empire, they had people, Roman colonies all over the empire, from Britain down to Egypt, and there was people of whatever ethnic group was local in every one of those cities, and basically all you had to do to become a Roman citizen, if you were near one of those cities, is go have your parents move there before you were born and get born there. Um, and so, there was dark-skinned Africans and olive-skinned Middle Easterns and light-skinned Northern Europeans and middle tech skinned Southern Europeans, and there were people that were dreaded Germanics. I mean, let's face it, the Germanics at this point in time were the biggest enemies of the Roman Empire. Um, eh, there was people from outside the Roman Empire that had uh, come in and given birth in a Roman colony, and their children were Roman citizens, and things like that. And there were some people thinking that this was getting out of hand, that people that really didn't love the empire and Rome were Roman citizens. Um, so people that acquired citizenship um, were facing a little bit of backlash. And so the commanders bragging about it, Paul said, "Yeah, I was born one." Kind of end the social status there, Commander also knows that somebody that's been born a Roman citizen is going to stand a little bit better chance in court if you go toe-to-toe with them. The courts respected people who are innately Romans. And the commander was a little alarmed at this because he had arrested Paul and put him in chains, not knowing he was a Roman citizen. Now, we're going to find out later that when he has to write a letter about it, he's going to say, "Hey, I found they were beating up a Roman citizen, so I went out and rescued him." Uh, he's going to put a spin on it. He's high enough command. He knows he has to play the politics. But at this moment, he's concerned because unless he can give a reason for it, he's violated the law. And he doesn't want Paul on his bad side. Um, Paul, in his thinking about it later, is going to realize God was at work and that, Commander was there to save his neck at God's insistence. And that, as long as he didn't get beat, he's flogged, he's probably okay. He was not mistreated by the Romans. Once they found out he was a Roman citizen, they're like, yeah, you don't have a charge to bring against your people. Oh, we'll release you. They're gonna do this again. Yeah, we'll protect you. Um, that's kind of the way the Romans handled it. Once they figured out what was going on. But at this moment, they're concerned because unless they can find a reason to either charge Paul with the crime or they arrested the wrong person. Um, they can plead that they were ignorant that he was a Roman citizen and he appeared to be the instigator, and so they arrested him. But then they gotta basically get a prosecutor to no-bill him and release him if they do that. And then they have to go do some work to figure out who they should have arrested and go arrest them. Of course, God is working in Paul to get him in a quiet, safe place to write. And this is just one step along the way. But God's also protecting Paul through his Roman citizenship, because now he's now in Roman custody, and the Romans, unless they have a crime to charge him with, they're going to give him protective custody. And they're not going to throw him in jail. They're not going to put him in prison. If he was a non-citizen, they might throw him in prison until they can figure out what to do with him. But he's a citizen, so they're going to protect him. And when they find out people want to kill Paul, they're going to, take a totally different stance. So Paul's in a good place now that he said he's a Roman citizen. They recognize that, and they, of course, there's no such thing as a documentation of it. You say it or you don't. Now, the Romans did have a fairly stiff penalty for people who lied about being a Roman citizen. If you lied about it and you got caught, you were executed. You were a non-citizen and you took the privileges without having paid the price and whatever. Oops, we don't put up with that. So the commander just trusts Paul. He knows that if Paul's lying, it'll catch up with him, and somebody greater and higher than him will order Paul executed, and he'll carry out that order, and end of problem. If he is, he's got to act like he is and treat him right, because it goes very badly for those who mistreat Roman citizens in the Roman Empire. Literally, they fought wars over that, internally and externally. There was times when Roman citizens would be kidnapped and they would invade a country they hadn't planned on over it. You didn't mess with Rome lightly. Now, if they were wanting to invade your country, they'd use the slightest excuse, and some of the things that were happened along those lines. They may have actually somebody wanted to invade the place, even though it wasn't formal policy from Rome. And citizen was kidnapped, and then we had to go rescue him. And after the fact, Rome's going to rubber stamp it and say, "Sure, go for it." But the commander is now concerned. He's got to watch his behind. He could be in trouble. Verse 30. The next day, since the commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priest and all the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had him stand before them. So the commander's doing a thorough investigation. He's doing what he's supposed to do, police work, find out what the charges were, why things happened. A Roman citizen was not above the law. You couldn't just go into a community that had no Roman citizens in it and do whatever you wanted to. You weren't a petty potentate. You had to follow local customs and local laws. Paul could have been arrested for violating the temple by the Romans. There was things that, if Paul had been desecrating the temple, the Romans would have enforced that. One thing, it was just good politics that if he really desecrated the temple, hey, we're paying this money for these priests to pray for us. You're upsetting the priest? No. We support the religions in general. We don't have to believe it, and we just, we don't care. We want everybody's God to be happy with us. And they're polytheists, and so, they had no problem thinking, oh, you got a new God that we've never met before. Sure, we want to keep him happy. So he's bringing them together. He's going to see what charges they bring against him, because he might have something actionable against Paul and say, hey, I arrested him because, he'd been doing this to the temple and he shouldn't have, and they got upset, and I went down and arrested him, found out even though he's a Roman citizen, he'd been violating the law, so we put him on trial. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. So, chapter 23, verse 1. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, My brothers, I fulfill my duty to God in all good conscience to this day. At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Those who were standing near Paul said, "You dare to insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I stand on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." So the commander basically is doing a fact-finding mission, takes him to the Sanhedrin, tries to find out what people were upset about Paul for. And Paul, if Paul realizes if he lets the priest get control of the situation, they're going to get the crowd all riled up, just like they did for Jesus. And basically, they're going to have a kangaroo court, and it's going to look like Paul was guilty of desecrating the temple. Never mind that he didn't have a Gentile in the temple, and what their false accusations just weren't true. But he realized that the Sanhedrin was just about evenly divided between Pharisees and Sadducees. He was a Pharisee, and he realized the deep religious division between the two. He knew it intimately. He probably had debated with Sadducees himself at one point in time. And he knew that if he could get that divide arguing with each other, it would look like half the Jews support him, half didn't, and he might get off with the Romans basically telling him, "There's no sin you committed. The Jews are just arguing with each other. Please leave town quietly, and you committed no crime. Sorry, we had to take you out of the crowd, and please don't hold it against us." And it started to get violent in the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was not normally a violent place. This is kind of like if the U.S. senators started getting violent with each other in the Capitol, we'd be like, "Huh, that's weird. that's unusual." In fact, it got so severe that the commander thought that Paul was in danger. And so he literally takes him into protective custody. Notice, back at the end of chapter 22, he released him. He kept him overnight, detained him overnight, and then he had already released him. Paul was a free man, but doing, commander was doing his job, doing police work, basically, trying to find out what's going on. And so now he has to take him in custody again, but this time it's for his own safety. And he can now, with full honesty, tell his superiors, "Hey, I found out he was a Roman citizen. It looked like they were going to harm him, so I took him protective custody, and we proceeded from there." When he first arrested him outside the temple, he was just trying to calm a riot. And now he's found out, it's the Jews' internal divisions that are causing the riot. and this Roman citizen was somehow tied up in the middle of it and got crosswise with the crowd, got him protective custody. The Roman commander has no problem with that. That he's obeying the law. He's fulfilling, trying to keep the Roman citizen with his rights. He can stand up in court and, you know, withstand any lawyer's grilling of what he did. Um, and, you know, and he can stand up in court of law in Rome or anywhere in the empire and say, yeah, I was trying to keep them from causing a riot. I was trying to protect a Roman citizen. I was trying to honor their religious traditions all, and this is where we ended up. And the commander's, beginning to figure out what's going on, and he's covering his behind, but he's protecting Paul. And so he takes him to the barracks. He's not going to put him in prison. This is protective custody. He didn't want the prisoners abusing him, and he doesn't want to abuse Paul by putting him in what were clearly pretty inhumane conditions. Even the nicer jails were not nice, even by world standards, even by today's standards in some of the poorer countries in the world. So he takes him into the barracks. The barracks were at least clean. Everybody had to wear clean clothes. You were given ample food and ample water, and it was the best quality water they could find. They didn't know a lot about disease, but they knew that, if the water smelled bad, tasted funny, et cetera, you're more likely to get sick. So, it was good tasting, good smelling water. It was reasonably clear, et cetera, et cetera. They were given a ration of wine to keep their water sanitary. And so, being in the barracks, you're safe. Let's face it, you don't attack a Roman barracks. You don't try to break in and get somebody out of it. It's stupider than trying to attack a Roman jail. You do a jailbreak, the Romans will try to protect it, but if you've thought it through, you might get in and get out with your prisoner and be safe. Get away with it for at least a while. It'd take the Romans a while to get up a search party and chase you down, and you do it right, you might be able to disappear. But they got a longer memory. Bureaucracies do, and for the rest of your life, you'll be looking over your shoulder to make sure some Roman soldier isn't looking for you. And they did have people that looked for people that escaped, and looked for people that helped people escape. In the barracks, let's face it, you have Roman soldiers all over the place. To go in and break in, you're basically going to have to fight the whole barracks. Because the barracks, they're soldiers. They're going to defend each other. They don't know why you're breaking it. It doesn't matter. If you're attacking it, they're going to defend it. It's the prisoner. It's the guy we got in protective custody. That doesn't matter. They don't care about him per se. Just, you're attacking the barracks. So you suddenly would have the whole contingent of soldiers that's under the commander's authority. And if there was other contingents there too, the Roman soldiers protected each other. They don't have to have orders from the top. Oh, somebody's attacking the barracks. Let's go. Job time. And they're trained soldiers on their land, on their territory, in their building. They know very well. He's in one of the safest places in the world for him right this moment. So they bring him into the barracks. He says, that night the Lord appears to him and tells him he's going to Rome. So Paul knows he's going to Rome. Now, this has been one of the things, and some of the letters indicate that even before this, Paul had had the vision that he wanted to go Rome, the dream, so to speak, but he hadn't yet implemented it. He was too busy puttering around on the eastern end of the Mediterranean, doing what God had told him to do, and all the missionary journeys he did, and going to places and talking to people and convincing them. And now God says, "You're going to Rome." He's in Jerusalem. He's given his report to the leaders. He's tried to keep everybody happy and placate them and fulfill his vows, and that didn't work. And now he's been arrested, but the Romans are treating him right. The Romans are protecting him. And now God tells him, "You're going to Rome." Um, you know, and Paul, just like when he took the vow to go to Jerusalem at the Lord's insistence, is doing what the Lord told him to do. Now the Lord's told him something different. You've gone to Jerusalem like I told you to. Now you're going to Rome. So Paul is going to be looking to go to Rome for the rest of the book of Acts. And you know, Paul trusted God. Okay, I'm going to Rome. I'm going to be safe. And you look at all the trials Paul has gone through to this point, and God's protecting him. We're going to look at the trials he goes through to get to Rome, and Paul steadfastly has the faith in God that God told him he's going to Rome, that all these trials he's going to go through getting to Rome are just troubles. He's going to make it to Rome because God told him he's going to make it to Rome. And us, with hindsight, knowing he made it to Rome, we're going to look at it and say, well, it's obvious. But consider if you were living this out and you weren't Paul and didn't have God having just told you, or even if you're a fairly normal human being, even if God told you, you go through all these trials and you begin to wonder, did God really, is this the end of the line for me? Paul doesn't do that. He steadfastly knows he's going to go to Rome, and he has faith, and he follows through on it. We have time to go through the next section. Verse 12. The next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priest and elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Now, this was kind of an odd arrangement. The Jews were getting more radical, and they were doing things like this. In fact, our word for assassin comes from a word that the Jews invented shortly after this, where a group of Jewish zealots were going to throw the Romans out by military force, and they engaged in terrorism and hit and run tactics. They did a lot of assassinations, hence why we call it assassination. They were all highly trained guerrilla fighters. An individual assassinee was actually a better soldier than a Roman soldier, but they didn't fight arm to arm, face to face, body to body like the Romans did against a big group of them against a big group. They just didn't have that many. At most, there was only a few thousand of them at any one point in time. Their tactics were to be very good at hand-to-hand combat, and there was recorded cases where one would take on 10 or 15 Roman soldiers and leave dead bodies and walk away. Um, it was not uncommon for those who attack a single guy attacking 5 or 6 Roman soldiers to walk away having killed them all, being unhurt. Um, the Romans obviously had a big problem with that, um, and they they encouraged the people, and it was part of what led to the Roman revolt, the Jewish revolt against Rome, and the destruction of Jerusalem. They got to be folk heroes, and people protected them, and people hid them, and they encouraged the other zealots in Jewish society to rise up together and even to cooperate, even though they didn't get along. Um, and it ultimately led to the destruction of the Jewish home state within the Roman Empire. Uh, so this is actually kind of a before that state. They were this was becoming what was fixing to come, and so 40 of them got together and said, "We're going to do this." 40 was a large enough number that if they fought together, they could overcome the few guards that would be protecting a uh, prisoner, generally 3 to 8. Um, even if they lost some lives, uh, taking this vow not to eat anything until they killed him meant they planned to do it pretty fast because just in a few days they'd get too weak to do any serious fighting. Um, and they were that serious about killing Paul that they knew they probably, some of them at least, would lose their lives. Even if they managed to kill Paul, they might, every one of them, be executed by the Romans. That's how serious they were. They knew they might starve to death. They knew they might die at the hands of the Roman soldiers in the process of trying to get to Paul and kill him. And, you know, they knew that the likelihood is they would be killed by the Roman after killing Paul. So this is how serious they were about killing Paul. But God had a way of thwarting that. Paul had a nephew. His sister's son was there in the temple courts where he could overhear it. The connection was probably not well known. But in Jewish society, bloodlines were very important, and you protected family even if you didn't get along with them. And, you know, blood thicker than water was definitely a truism there. They may not have gotten along with Paul. They were clearly chummy with the powers that be in the temple. That's why the nephew was in the temple. Paul did come from a politically connected family within Jewish society. Yeah, he was born in a Roman colony, but he got raised in Jerusalem under Gamaliel. His sister would have probably been married off to a family that was very important in Jewish society. The nephew she may have been married to a priest or a Levite or an important Pharisee or somebody like that. So the nephew may have just simply been doing what he does daily. He may have been in the temple and been somebody nobody considered that he would be opposed to what they were fixing to do. But he knew his uncle and knew that if it was a plot against his uncle, this was important. And so he went to tell his uncle, Paul, that there was a plot against him. And so he told Paul. Verse 17. Then Paul called to one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them because there are more than 40 of them waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." So, you know, the plot gets found out. It gets reported to Paul. Paul knows he's powerless to do anything about it, but he also knows the commander is going to protect him as a Roman citizen. And so he sends the young man to talk to the commander. The commander finds out, and the commander basically tells the young man, "Don't tell anybody that you told me," because he knows the young man will be in danger. He knows Paul is in danger right now. He knows his men are in danger. And if they carry it out, he's going to be in danger because he let a Roman citizen get killed. Even if he gets all 40 men and executes them, um, you know, and he knows that the Sanhedrin, which he can do nothing about, is plotting with them. Um, so, he has a dilemma on his hands. He knows that this could go south very fast, and he knows the tension that's in Jerusalem, and he wants to keep the peace. That's his job. Um, he's to do it with the least loss of life of anybody that he can. He can't just go out and, you know, start whacking heads all over Jerusalem. Um, the more violence that gets on, the worse it's going to get, and he knows that. He knows that this could lead to a civil war, and he knows he has to protect Paul. And so he just wants the young man, "Thanks for telling me the information. Now go be quiet and live your life normally and let me handle it." So Commander has to figure out what to do. Well, he has him in protective custody, so he's going to keep him in protective custody. He's not just going to turn him loose knowing that, hey, there's 40 guys looking to kill him. You can't just turn him loose. And you can't tell him to slip out of the city quietly because they might find that out and chase him down, and then he's unprotected. He's protecting a Roman citizen. Rome, in one sense, will not care what expense the commander goes to protect Paul. Now they give him a budget, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and he's supposed to do things with it. And commander knows all those things. He's going to try to be frugal in doing it, but he's got to protect a Roman citizen. That's his first job, in one sense. Protect the empire, protect the Romans. He also doesn't want to lose his men. Doesn't want to cause needless death, and doesn't really want to cause civilian deaths. If he could find enough information to know what the 40 men are, he might have been able to send enough teams out to go arrest everybody and put them on trial for the conspiracy. And, well, okay, you're sworn not to eat or drink anything. We can leave you sitting in a jail with no food and water until we get around to trial. And, oh, we're so sorry you starved to death. That would not be beyond the Roman commander. But there's got to be a better way. He doesn't want to try to protect Paul in that kind of hostile environment. It could get serious and nasty very fast. Verse 23. Then he called two of his centurions and ordered them, Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he can be taken safely to Governor Felix. He wrote a letter as follows: Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix. Greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him when I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I had wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I thought I found that the accusations had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. Commander's playing coverings behind. He's kicking it up one level. He's taking it to the governor, and we have Luke has recorded his letter, so we know the commander's name. The commander's name is Claudius Lysias. Hey, he did God's work, so God's put his name in Scripture. Quite an honor. Luke is also recording this because if the Romans wanted to, at their trial, question him, they now know which commander it was. It's not just a nameless commander somewhere out in the military. Lots and lots of commanders across the Roman Empire. And the Roman bureaucracy would have been able to find this guy and bring him into Rome if they wanted to question him or depose him where he was, depending upon their, if they wanted to depose him for the trial. And they also know what official he was sent to. The Governor Felix would have been well known to the bureaucracy, to the judiciary. They would have basically asked Governor Felix for the court records or the jurisdiction that Governor Felix was over. As we'll learn, Governor Felix didn't stay in that position long. And he left office, transferred, as was actually kind of a Roman custom. After you've served long enough in one place, particularly if you're doing the job right, but it's causing trouble, we change personnel out and get you somewhere else where it's more friendly. Thanks for doing your job right. We'll get the locals placated because they hate your guts because you did it the Roman way, and then we'll stick somebody else in that does it the Roman way, and in 2 or 3 years we'll have to transfer them too, but we'll give them thanks and another job. Governor Felix, basically, that's what happened to him. And so we know who the governors were, the people involved, and this commander is now stating his case of why he has a Roman citizen in custody. Hey, I found out they were trying to kill him, and I went down and rescued him, and I tried to investigate, and I found out it had nothing to do with anything he should be arrested for or executed for, and then I found out there's a plot to kill him, so I'm getting him out of town. Also, notice the contingent that went with him. They're going to provide Paul with horses. He's going to ride. He's not going to have to march. He's not going to have to walk. 200 soldiers. They're going to march with armor and a sword and 70 horsemen. Roman cavalry were not heavily armored, but against civilians, they were pretty heavily armored. War horses were pretty stout creatures, and they taught them to actually be a weapon in and of themselves, to recognize a Roman soldier and leave them alone, and then anybody else on the battlefield was fair game for the horse to kick or trample or bite or whatever. And the horsemen were equipped with generally swords and spears. And then 200 spearmen. Um, so, you know, 470 soldiers to guard one prisoner. And the prisoner is mounted on a horse. So he can move as fast as the horsemen do. Worst comes to worst, 400 soldiers can engage the enemy, and 70 soldiers can whisk Paul away and command his horse, and they can surround him and out travel. Let's face it, the Jews were not known for being horse cavalry. They weren't horse people. They weren't good at horses. And so the commander has this pretty rigorous way of protecting Paul. We're going to get you faster than the people want to kill you. We're going to put more manpower than they have. And even should they get the drop on us as we march, we got a plan where they can engage these foot soldiers that are going to try to kill you, and we can whisk you away on horse. And, depending upon the centurions that are engaged in the battle, what they want to do, some of the cavalry can peel off and help the foot soldiers and, be a mobile, effective flanking force, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he's thinking like a military commander. And he's got a political football that he has to protect, and he doesn't want to get in trouble. And so he's doing what he can. And he sends this letter, and he sends him off. Verse 31. So the soldiers carrying out they're also leaving at 9 o'clock at night. That's not normal time for Roman soldiers to leave. It's not normally the time that Jewish patriots would be out watching. They're expecting if they're going to move the prisoner, they'll move him, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock kind of thing. So the commander's got the surprise on him. Yeah, the soldiers are up to, okay, we're fixing to pull an all-nighter. Great. But they also know, it's better to pull an all-nighter and get to Caesarea and get a full day's rest before we go back than to have to battle it out there in Jerusalem. So, in one sense, they got a cushy job, because if they do their job right, they ride to Caesarea. It's an all-night march, and then they're done. So, verse 31. So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day, they let the cavalry go with him while they returned to the barracks. Basically, they went 2 days walk, 2 days march overnight. These are Roman soldiers. They're double timing. Yeah, they're under orders. The commander knew who he picked. And they rested up some. The soldiers would have changed out horses and at the garrison there, and would have been able to go on. They knew that if they traveled as the 470, word would get out, and there might be a chance that the others would catch up with them. But the horses could go faster than the Jews could catch up with them. And so if the horse soldiers go on, the cavalry goes on with Paul, they simply outrun anything we find. The foot soldiers have done their job. They protected him in the most dangerous part of it, down in the heart of Jewish territory. They're now basically on the border, across the border, where there's not many Jews, and there's not much Jewish opposition. Most of the Jews that are living there are trying to be peaceable and not cause trouble because they're surrounded by the Gentiles. And so, the plan's reasonable. Send the faster troops forward with Paul, slower troops can go back home, and they've done their job. They protected him far enough that they got him into safe territory, and now they can let him go. Verse 33. When the cavalry arrived at Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Sicily, he said, I will hear your case when your accusers get here. Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. So he's giving protective custody too. Herod's palace, well, it's palace. It's the nice place. He didn't put him down in the barracks. He could have. He's giving him nice digs. This is like, okay, if there was a prisoner in Washington, D.C., this is like putting him up in the Naval Observatory where the vice president lives. You know, you're not doing that casually. Or like having him as a guest in the White House while he waits trial. You know, Governor Felix is treating him really nice. He's not just getting plenty of good quality food, he's getting sumptuous food. He's being treated like you're the good guy, and yeah, we have to have a trial, but we know how this trial's going to turn out, so we want to stay on your good side. He's not, in one sense, he's not a prisoner. He's under protective custody, and Governor Felix is going to have a trial because that's the Roman custom. You have to have a trial to determine the case. And he's going to, but this is a Roman citizen. And Felix, while he knows about Jewish politics, he does not have any political entanglement with them. He has no reason to want to keep the Jews happy, other than cost Rome a lot if he stirs up too much trouble. He's wanting to keep Rome happy. And he's got a Roman citizen that's being accused by the Jews, apparently. And so he's got him in protective custody. He's treating him well. He's keeping him in a secure place, sure, but there's no, harshness to his treatment. And he's saying, okay, the Jews will have to come up here to Caesarea, to me, to my court, to make the accusations, and then we'll deal with it. Gracious Lord, thank you for protecting Paul, for bringing him into Roman custody and protecting him, for having him on the way to Rome, to be able to write the New Testament, to be able to write letters to other places that aren't preserved as New Testament, to continue to be able to spread the word, to be able to spread the word in Rome. Lord, you were amazing at how you worked things out. You literally bent an empire to your will. And they thought they were doing their will. Lord, I love the humor of it. I love the intelligence of it, the planning and the forethought you put into it. And Paul probably didn't see it, except in hindsight. Luke is only beginning to show us that he understood it, but not pointed out. Lord, thank you for being that loving God that plans things out. How much work you went to get the New Testament written, and help us to appreciate it. Help us to appreciate the product you generated, the work you went to, the work you had people go to. Thank you for protecting Paul. We know that you are the same protector today for us, that if we are doing your will and doing what you want us to do, that you will protect us. Um, we know that ultimately in this life, there's, you know, in one sense, only so much that can be done to protect us because our ultimate protection is in heaven, where there is no death, no sickness, no weeping, no gnashing of teeth. We look forward to that protection, where better protection the Roman Empire can give is given to every one of us. Lord, help us to realize that and have faith in you, just like Paul did, that he knew he was going to Rome. Have us to do what you want us to do, that we will understand it and do it. Um, Help us to be people that tell other people about you, and that we communicate our faith in you, that we would be bold in doing so. In your gracious name, amen. I hope to see you Wednesday. I hope to see you Wednesday, and I do plan to be there. And if not, I'll see you here next week.